6 months after Calvin Mercer demoted me for refusing to sign a lie, he walked into Arcadia's contract review room, smiling like the meeting had already been decided. "This should be a formality," he said, placing a leather folder on the table. Then the committee secretary read the final line of the agenda. "Vendor approval requires the signature of Director Amelia Thornton." Calvin's smile disappeared. He looked up and saw me sitting directly across from him. "Amelia." "Calvin." He adjusted his cuff, which was what he usually did when reality failed to respect his schedule. "I wasn't aware you were involved. It was in the procurement packet." Reading had never been Calvin's preferred route to understanding. He liked summaries, preferably written by someone who already knew what answer he wanted. 6 months earlier, I had been Northbridge Clinical Logistics Director of Quality Assurance. I managed 12 employees and oversaw temperature-controlled shipments of biologic drugs across New England. On one Friday afternoon, a shipment worth $28 million exceeded its approved temperature range for 3 hours and 17 minutes. The sensor data was clear. Calvin's requested report was not. He called me into conference room B. Dana Rourke from Human Resources and Compliance was already seated there with a document in front of my chair. The conclusion read, "No material temperature deviation occurred." I looked at Calvin. "That is false. It is supportable. The shipment exceeded 8 degrees. Briefly, 3 hours. 3 hours can be brief in the correct commercial context. So can a regulatory investigation." Dana stopped arranging her papers. Calvin tapped the signature line. "The manufacturer has not confirmed degradation. They also haven't confirmed stability. We are not destroying $28 million because a sensor had an unusual afternoon. There were 6 sensors." "Sign the report, Amelia." I stared at the page longer than I want to admit. My father had suffered a stroke 4 months earlier. I was helping pay for rehabilitation. My bonus was due in 6 weeks. I knew refusing would cost me something. For one very ugly moment, I considered signing. Maybe the medicine was fine. Maybe the packaging had protected it. Maybe I was being rigid because saying no had become part of my identity. That is the part people leave out when they tell stories about integrity. Sometimes you are not brave. Sometimes you are scared, tired, and holding an expensive pen. I pushed the report back. "I can recommend quarantine and testing. I cannot certify that nothing happened." Calvin's face became calm. That was worse than anger. 2 days later, he gathered my team and announced a leadership realignment. I was demoted from Director of Quality Assurance to Records Coordination Manager. I lost my staff, my office, and most of my bonus. Dana called it a lateral move. My new office was in the basement beside archived shipping manifests and a vending machine that accepted money but considered snacks optional. I carried my belongings downstairs. In the elevator, I dropped my favorite laboratory flask mug. The handle broke off. That was when I cried, not during the demotion, over a $7 mug. When I reached the basement, a copy of the shipment report was waiting on my desk. Someone had signed it. The electronic approval belonged to Owen Blake, a 26-year-old analyst I had trained 3 months earlier. His desk upstairs was already empty. I called Owen immediately, straight to voicemail. His company email had already been disabled. Dana told me his employment had concluded, which is the kind of phrase Human Resources uses when they want a termination to sound like a weather pattern. "Did he resign?" I asked. "His departure was voluntary." "Did he say that?" "It is reflected in the file. Files are very confident when the person they describe is no longer in the building." According to the record, Owen had accepted responsibility for the report, signed it voluntarily, and resigned for personal reasons. Owen once called me before submitting a vacation request because he worried taking 4 consecutive days might seem too vacation-like. Nothing about this felt voluntary. That afternoon, Ethan Morales came to the basement carrying a box of sensor cables. He worked in systems analysis and spoke quietly even when discussing lunch. "The raw logs don't match the summary," he said. I stopped labeling folders. "What changed?" "The warning threshold. The sensors originally triggered alerts above 8 degrees Celsius. After the shipment reached the hospitals, someone changed the dashboard limit to 10 degrees and regenerated the summary. The original device logs still showed the excursion. Who made the change? I don't know yet. Does Calvin know you noticed? Ethan looked toward the stairwell. I asked a question during a meeting. Dana invited me to discuss my career development. That was not career development. That was a professionally worded threat wearing sensible shoes. I told Ethan not to send me any files. Use the external whistleblower portal. It routes through compliance. Dana runs compliance. Yes, I noticed the design flaw. His wife was 8 months pregnant. He showed me an ultrasound picture, then apologized as though sharing it had violated policy. We need the insurance, he said. I understand. My father's rehabilitation center had called that morning about an unpaid balance. I had spent 20 minutes arguing over a charge labeled enhanced mobility support. It meant someone had helped him sit in a chair. Doing the right thing always sounds cleaner before the bill arrives. That evening, I visited my father in Cambridge. He was practicing lifting his left hand. Work bad? He asked. I got moved. Up? No. He nodded as if this confirmed everything he believed about office buildings. I did not tell him about the lost bonus. I peeled an orange badly and left bits of white skin all over his tray. The next morning, Arcadia Health Network sent Northbridge an urgent request. One of its hospital pharmacies had found gaps in the shipment timestamps. Arcadia demanded the original device logs, calibration records, and complete deviation history within 48 hours. Calvin called me upstairs. Dana was already there. So was a prepared explanation, blaming the missing timestamps on a synchronization error. You know the system, Calvin said. Arcadia trusts your judgment. You removed me from quality. This is an exception. So my judgment is unreliable for management but useful for customer reassurance? He pushed the statement toward me. All you need to say is that the discrepancy does not affect product integrity. We do not know that. Calvin leaned closer. You have already lost your title. Think about what else you can afford to lose. For once, I had no clever answer. I thought about my father's invoices. I thought about Ethan's unborn daughter. Then Calvin's phone rang. Dr. Lena Price from Arcadia. He declined the call. A second later, my phone rang. Same name. I answered Lena's call with Calvin sitting across from me. Miss Thornton, she said, are you still responsible for Northbridge quality assurance? Calvin shook his head sharply. No, I said. His expression changed. Who replaced you? Lena asked. I have not been told. Calvin wrote on a legal pad, refer her to communications. I turned the pad around and slid it back. Lena asked whether I could confirm that the timestamp problem was harmless. I cannot confirm that without the original logs and an independent stability review. Calvin stood up. Dana suddenly became very interested in the edge of her folder. Lena thanked me and ended the call. You deliberately undermined Northbridge, Calvin said. I answered a factual question. You could have provided context. The context is that we do not know whether the medication remained stable. By noon, Dana had prepared a separation agreement, 6 months of salary. Health insurance through the end of the year. A positive reference. Enough money to cover most of my father's rehabilitation costs. I sat in her office holding the agreement while a lavender diffuser worked extremely hard to make the room feel humane. Northbridge wants to support your transition, Dana said. I was demoted 4 days ago. Sometimes a realignment reveals that both parties need a new direction. I read the document. It said my demotion resulted from documented performance limitations. There were no such documents. Then I reached Section 9. By signing, I would confirm that all quality reports issued during my tenure were accurate and that Northbridge had complied with its obligations to Arcadia. I held the pen. For several seconds, I imagined the bills disappearing. My father could stay at the Better Rehabilitation Center. I could sleep without checking 3 bank accounts before midnight. I hated that I wanted to sign. I hated Dana for noticing. That language is standard, she said. Then remove it. It protects Northbridge from future misunderstandings. It protects Calvin from the current understanding. I placed the pen down. I won't sign Section 9. Dana sighed. You are making this more difficult than necessary. That sentence is becoming the company motto. I left without the money. In the elevator, I pressed the wrong floor and ended up in executive dining, a place I had never been invited to use in 9 years. A chef asked if I was there for lunch. No, professional collapse. He handed me a cookie. It was the kindest thing Northbridge had done for me that week. That evening, Lena emailed my personal account. She did not offer to rescue me. She invited me to apply for Arcadia's newly created Director of Vendor Approval position. The job involved evaluating pharmaceutical logistics companies across New England, including Northbridge. I replied that I could not discuss confidential information and would disclose every conflict. Her answer came quickly. That is why I contacted you. The next morning, my badge no longer worked. Security handed me a termination letter citing continued inability to collaborate with senior leadership. As I carried my belongings through the lobby, Ethan stepped from the elevator. He said nothing. He slipped a folded greeting card into my box. Outside, I opened it. The front said, "Congratulations on your retirement." Inside, Ethan had written, "The original logs still exist. I used the external portal. They are trying to identify me." Arcadia's hiring process lasted 7 weeks. There were 4 interviews, a background check, a conflict review, and 1 personality assessment that described me as cautious under uncertainty. I worked in pharmaceutical safety. Someone adventurous under uncertainty would be a public health incident. Lena offered me the position in December. The salary was better than Northbridge, but the authority mattered more. My team could suspend a vendor without asking the finance department whether patient safety fit the quarterly budget. My first week was terrible. I entered the wrong contract code into Arcadia's procurement system and sent an incomplete packet to 17 department heads. Replies arrived almost immediately. One contained only a question mark. Another asked whether the missing pages were an exercise in minimalist administration. I called each person and apologized. By the 9th call, I stopped trying to sound polished. "I'm new," I told a cardiology director. "I made the form smaller than the problem." He laughed and gave me another day. I stayed until nearly midnight repairing the packet. At 10:30, Lena appeared at my door. "You know this can wait until morning." I caused it. That does not make sleep optional. At Northbridge, exhaustion had been treated like proof of commitment. At Arcadia, Lena viewed it as a process failure. I did not know how to respond to that. For weeks, I expected someone to discover I had been hired by mistake. I reread emails 3 times. I printed files I had already saved. I sometimes checked my calendar at 2 a.m. to confirm meetings still existed. Once, I drove halfway to Northbridge before realizing Arcadia was in the opposite direction. Habit is especially embarrassing when witnessed by a toll booth. But I improved. I created a vendor risk scoring system separating pricing from safety. I required written explanations for every exception and removed 3 redundant approval steps no one could explain. Within 3 months, Arcadia reduced emergency purchasing costs by 8% without lowering standards. Then Arcadia announced a 5-year pharmaceutical logistics contract valued at up to $410 million. 9 companies submitted bids. Northbridge ranked second on price. I stared at the name longer than necessary. Then I disclosed my history immediately. Arcadia's general counsel removed me from price scoring and technical evaluation. An independent committee would handle those stages. I would participate only in the final compliance review, using public criteria, with outside counsel checking every decision. It was fair. It also meant Calvin might eventually sit across from me. 4 weeks later, he did. He entered the review room with Dana and 2 attorneys. "Amelia," he said warmly, "good to see you doing well. I'm pleased to confirm I remain employable." One attorney looked down to hide a reaction. Calvin described the shipment problem as a past misunderstanding. I asked for the corrective action report. Dana handed me a binder thick enough to qualify as furniture. Most of it looked convincing. Then I reached the sensor inventory. 3 serial numbers did not match the purchasing records. I checked twice. Northbridge had certified that its raw data came from sensors it had never purchased. I sent Northbridge a standard clarification request: purchase records, calibration certificates, device assignment logs, original data files. Calvin called within an hour. "You know those records are commercially sensitive. They are required. Other vendors are not receiving this level of scrutiny. They are when their equipment appears to exist in 2 places at once." 1 sensor was listed as active in Worcester and Providence on the same afternoon. Unless Northbridge had developed teleportation, the records were wrong. Calvin accused me of retaliation. I offered to submit the issue to Arcadia's ethics committee. He declined. People usually enjoy independent review until someone offers it. Northbridge submitted partial records 2 days later. The files were polished, heavily formatted, and almost useless. Calibration dates were missing. Device assignments had been recreated from summaries instead of raw logs. Then, Ethan used Arcadia's external reporting service. He did not contact me directly. His submission showed that Northbridge had changed warning thresholds after several shipments. The alterations came from an administrator account managed by Dana's department. Arcadia paused Northbridge's compliance review. By Friday, trade publications were reporting that a former Northbridge executive now had influence over its contract. My name appeared before the altered data. Calvin appeared several paragraphs later. The woman with the conflict received top billing. The executive with the missing sensors was supporting material. Lena asked whether I wanted to step away temporarily. Yes. The answer came faster than I expected. Arcadia appointed another director to manage the review. I would provide procedural information but have no decision-making authority. That weekend my father called. Are you in trouble? I don't know. Did you do wrong? No. Then quit. I just started. You can quit new job too. He was trying to protect me. It still hurt. I spent Saturday cleaning my apartment because anxiety apparently considers baseboards urgent. In a kitchen cabinet, I found the broken laboratory flask mug from Northbridge. I had wrapped it in newspaper and forgotten it. I glued the handle back badly and placed it beside the sink. On Monday, Northbridge sent a supplemental report. It contained an electronic approval authorizing the revised sensor settings. My signature appeared at the bottom. The certificate looked valid. The date fell 3 days before my demotion. For several seconds I doubted myself. Had I signed something during that chaotic week? There had been dozens of reports. My father's appointments, Owen disappearing. Maybe I had approved a temporary change and forgotten. That possibility frightened me more than I expected. Arcadia requested my archived authentication history. Northbridge said it was unavailable because my account had been routinely decommissioned. Then Dana messaged me from her personal phone. Do not trust the certificate. Calvin had access to your old credentials. I can prove more. But I need protection. I did not answer Dana. I forwarded her message to Arcadia's general counsel and my attorney, Miriam Cho. Miriam wore plain black suits, carried 3 pens, and trusted none of them. She is not contacting you because she found a conscience, Miriam said. I know. She thinks Calvin will sacrifice her. I know that too. Good. Still dangerous? Dana was offered a protected meeting with investigators. I was not allowed to attend. That was probably wise. I wanted answers. I also wanted to throw her decorative tissue box through a window. Meanwhile, Northbridge released a statement claiming I had approved the sensor changes before leaving. An anonymous executive described me as emotionally invested in punishing former colleagues. Emotionally invested. Apparently, accurate temperature logs became emotional when they threatened revenue. 2 Arcadia board members questioned whether I should remain employed. Lena did not defend me with a dramatic speech. She asked them to wait for the authentication audit. At first, that felt cold. Then I understood. Supporting me without evidence would simply create another accusation of favoritism. The audit took 12 days. My electronic certificate had been recreated using a copy of my digital token after Northbridge disabled my account. The access happened at 2:08 a.m. from Calvin's executive network. When Miriam told me, I laughed once. Then I cried in the parking garage. Calvin had forged my approval. But what hurt most was that I had doubted my own memory. He knew I had been overworked, distracted by my father's illness, and buried in reports. He counted on me wondering whether I had forgotten. Dana's statement expanded the investigation. She admitted Calvin had ordered threshold changes after at least 11 shipments. Some products were destroyed. Others were delivered. Northbridge then filed insurance claims for certain damaged shipments, while still billing customers as though delivery had been completed successfully. They were paid twice? I asked. In several cases, possibly. Dana also produced emails instructing her to create performance files against employees who challenged quality summaries. Owen had not resigned. Calvin had threatened him into signing, then fired him anyway. Ethan remained employed, but Northbridge had begun tracking his system access and questioning coworkers about his attitude. His wife went into labor that same week. He answered investigators' questions from a hospital cafeteria while waiting to meet his daughter. Arcadia suspended the entire $410 million procurement process and notified regulators, insurers, and federal investigators. Calvin called Lena and demanded my termination. She put the call on speaker with counsel present. "One vindictive former employee is destabilizing this company," he said. Lena asked whether he disputed the authentication audit. He called it incomplete. She asked about the changed thresholds, evolving technical interpretation. "Did the interpretation evolve before or after the insurance claim?" Lena asked. Calvin did not answer. Arcadia scheduled a vendor integrity hearing. Northbridge submitted its witness list: Dana, Ethan, Owen. Calvin intended to use all three people he had threatened to prove he had done nothing wrong. The hearing took place in Providence. The room had beige walls, weak coffee, and water pitchers that tasted faintly metallic. Accountability apparently came without interior design. Calvin arrived with 4 attorneys. Dana sat behind them. Ethan sat with federal counsel. Owen sat alone. He looked thinner than I remembered. His jacket hung loosely, and he kept rubbing his thumb along the edge of a notebook. Northbridge's attorney described the temperature excursions as minor anomalies. No patient had been harmed. Miriam whispered, "That usually means they were lucky." I testified after lunch. I described the shipment, Calvin's requested report, and my refusal. The attorney asked whether I understood that quarantining the medication could cost Northbridge $28 million. Yes. And you still recommended it? I recommended testing before patients received medication of uncertain stability. He asked whether I was angry about being demoted. Yes. That answer surprised him. Angry enough to damage Northbridge? No. But you admit resentment. I admit being human. I do not admit altering data. Owen testified next. At first, he said he had signed the report voluntarily. Calvin watched him without blinking. For one terrible minute, it looked as though Northbridge might place everything on the frightened analyst. Then Arcadia's counsel asked why Owen left. I was fired. Northbridge's attorney objected. His personnel record said voluntary resignation. Owen looked at Dana. I was told to sign, he said. Mr. Mercer threatened to report me for falsifying calibration records. Had you falsified them? No. Why did you sign? Owen swallowed. My mother has multiple sclerosis. She had just moved into my apartment. I needed the insurance. He looked toward me. I thought Amelia's refusal would protect me. Then they moved her downstairs and called me in. I felt sick. I had spent months wondering whether I failed him. He had spent the same months believing I abandoned him. Dana testified under her cooperation agreement. She authenticated emails, meeting notes, and recordings. One recording captured Calvin telling her to create a performance path for me before the shipment incident. Another captured him telling Owen, sign it tonight. Tomorrow we decide whether keeping you creates additional risk. Ethan testified last. His daughter had been born 8 days earlier. He looked like he had slept for approximately 12 minutes. He explained the changed thresholds and copied digital token. Calvin's attorney accused him of unauthorized access. I maintained those systems, Ethan said. You wanted to harm Mr. Mercer. I wanted him to stop changing what happened. The committee removed Northbridge from the $410 million contract. I had no vote. Outside the hearing room, federal agents handed Calvin a preservation order. He laughed. This is administrative. One agent replied, then administration should be easy. By the time Calvin returned to Boston, someone inside Northbridge was already trying to delete records. The deletion attempt came from Calvin's home office. He had accessed Northbridge's archive 14 minutes after leaving the hearing. Nothing disappeared permanently. Ethan had already placed the relevant systems under legal hold. I texted him. Thank you. He replied, my daughter just threw up on my keyboard. Data integrity remained strong. Federal investigators searched Calvin's office and Dana's records. They found altered shipment summaries, insurance submissions, and a private spreadsheet tracking bonuses protected by quality risk adjustments. That phrase was almost impressive. Northbridge had turned possible medication instability into an executive compensation plan. The board suspended Calvin and fired Dana. Lenders froze credit. Hospital systems paused contracts. Employees began calling Arcadia to ask whether Northbridge would close. Most of them had done nothing wrong. Warehouse workers packed boxes. Drivers followed routes. Pharmacists asked questions and were told everything was fine. I wanted Calvin punished. I did not want 600 employees to lose health insurance because he had treated safety like a pricing problem. Arcadia awarded the $410 million contract to two smaller vendors working as a consortium. Their price was 9% higher. Lena defended the decision. Cheap logistics are not cheap if we cannot trust the shipment. The sentence appeared in several publications. She hated that. I sound rehearsed. You were rehearsed. That is not the issue. Northbridge's board asked Arcadia to support a temporary operating agreement while new leadership was installed. Some Arcadia executives expected me to oppose it. I did not. I remember what Northbridge did, I said. This decision concerns medication access and employees who did not alter records. We imposed strict conditions: independent quality control, direct regulator access, no executive bonuses, whistleblower protection, daily shipment reporting. Northbridge accepted because insolvency was the alternative. Then, investigators discovered that Northbridge had billed Arcadia for replacement shipments that were never sent. The suspected loss exceeded $32 million. Calvin was arrested on charges involving wire fraud, false claims, and obstruction. Dana was charged separately and continued cooperating. Owen received notice that his employment record would be corrected. Northbridge agreed to pay his withheld bonus and medical expenses from the period after his termination. He did not want his job back. I can't walk into that building, he said when we met near Longwood Medical Area. He kept turning my repaired mug in his hands. You kept this? The handle is mostly decorative. He apologized for signing the report. I told him I had considered signing too. He looked shocked. You didn't? No. But I wanted the money. I wanted my father's bills gone. I wanted Calvin to stop. Owen started crying. So did I. A waiter placed extra napkins on the table and quietly left. 2 months later, Northbridge entered federal monitoring and replaced half its board. The company survived. Arcadia promoted me to vice president of vendor integrity. My new office was almost the same size as the one Calvin had taken from me. On my first morning, I stood in the doorway and could not step inside. Lena waited behind me. You can change the furniture. It's not the furniture. I know. Eventually I walked in. On the desk lay Northbridge's federal monitoring plan. The final page required independent approval for every future quality exception. The standard I had been demoted for defending was now mandatory. Calvin's case took 14 months. He changed attorneys twice and argued that quality regulations were too complicated for senior executives to understand directly. That was an interesting defense from a man who had overruled specialists whenever safety affected revenue. Dana pleaded guilty to falsifying corporate records and testified against him. Her cooperation reduced her sentence. It did not save her career. She lost her certification, forfeited stock options, and settled civil claims from Owen, Ethan, and me. For a while, I wanted an apology. Eventually, I realized I did not want Dana's regret inside my life. I wanted corrected records and a system that prevented another person from doing the same thing quietly. Owen joined a medical device company in Connecticut. Ethan became Northbridge's director of data transparency. He disliked the title. It sounds like I manage Windows. Would you prefer vice president of please stop deleting things? He thought about it. Yes. His daughter appeared during nearly every video call and cried whenever someone mentioned quarterly reporting. My father continued rehabilitation and moved back into his apartment. He could walk short distances with a cane. His speech slowed when he was tired, but his sarcasm returned. When I told him about my promotion, he said, "So now you approve liars?" "I approve vendors." Same building? Sometimes. Arcadia's new logistics consortium completed its first year without a major temperature incident. Costs were higher at first, then decreased as the vendors combined routes and distribution centers. Safety and financial discipline had not been opposites. They had simply required planning beyond the next executive bonus. Calvin pleaded guilty shortly before trial. The evidence included altered logs, insurance claims, emails, and his attempted deletion. He received a federal prison sentence, restitution obligations, and a ban from executive roles in healthcare logistics. At sentencing, he blamed client pressure and investor expectations. He still described fraud as if it were weather. I submitted a written statement but did not attend. Miriam told me, "You have spent enough time in rooms organized around Calvin." That helped. 2 years after the hearing, Northbridge applied for a small pilot contract transporting low-risk supplies between 3 Arcadia clinics. Several colleagues wanted an automatic rejection. "They forged your signature," one director said. "I remember. They tried to destroy your career. I remember that too." But Calvin was gone. Dana was gone. Northbridge had replaced its censor platform, repaid disputed claims, corrected employee files, and passed 3 independent audits. Rejecting the company forever might feel satisfying. It would not automatically be fair. I disclosed my history again. Arcadia's ethics committee allowed me to participate under outside review. Northbridge's new CEO, Marisol Vega, entered the meeting with Ethan, an independent auditor, and 6 months of raw data. "We expect difficult questions," she said. "That is a useful expectation." The pilot passed technical and financial scoring. Then the file reached my desk. I almost signed. Then I found one problem. Northbridge's new whistleblower policy protected employees from termination. It did not protect them from demotion, lost bonuses, or punitive reassignment. I closed the file. Northbridge had changed, it had not changed enough. I sent Northbridge a conditional denial. The policy had to protect whistleblowers from termination, demotion, schedule retaliation, bonus reduction, and adverse reassignment. Marisol called me. "We modeled our language on federal requirements. Federal minimums are not the same as a safe system. Our board will resist the bonus provision. Then employees will understand that reporting misconduct still has a price." She paused. "That sounds personal. It is informed by experience. The standard is still valid." I expected an argument. Instead, she asked for 10 business days. Northbridge returned in 8. The revised policy required an outside review whenever an employee who reported a quality issue experienced any negative employment action within 12 months. It also restored anonymous access to audit logs and prohibited compliance from reporting only to operations. Ethan added a rule requiring executive authentication keys to expire immediately after personnel changes. He highlighted it in yellow. Subtlety was not part of his recovery. Arcadia's ethics committee approved the revisions, so did outside counsel. On a rainy Thursday, I signed Northbridge's pilot contract. It took less than 3 seconds. No dramatic music. No applause. Just my name beneath a statement that was finally true. Marisol looked relieved. Ethan looked exhausted. "Congratulations," I said. "You have been approved for the smallest contract in Arcadia." "We're framing that," Ethan replied. The 6-month pilot produced 2 minor temperature deviations. Both were reported immediately, investigated, and corrected. Under Calvin, those incidents would have been rewritten. Under the new system, they proved the controls worked. Arcadia expanded the contract modestly. Not because I forgave Northbridge. Companies do not need forgiveness. They need accountability and systems that do not require every employee to be heroic. On the anniversary of my demotion, I visited Northbridge's Worcester facility for an inspection. The loading bays looked the same. The fluorescent hallways looked the same. The break room refrigerator still contained yogurt that appeared older than several interns. The basement office had become a secure document room. The vending machine was gone. Good. Some machines do not deserve a second chance. Owen joined Ethan and me for lunch. He brought me a new laboratory flask mug with a reinforced handle. "Quality improvement," he said. Before leaving, I spoke with 3 young analysts. One asked what she should do if an executive pressured her to alter a report. "Document it. Use the external channel. Contact counsel. Do not meet alone if you feel unsafe." Then she asks the harder question. "What if I'm scared?" "You probably will be." Her face fell. I continued. "Fear does not mean you are wrong. It means the consequences are real. Ask for help. Before you convince yourself you must handle everything alone." That was what I wish someone had told me. Back at Arcadia, I stood in the same review room where Calvin had once called approval a formality. Lena entered carrying coffee. "Do you regret approving Northbridge?" "No." "Do you regret not rejecting them forever?" "No." "That sounds suspiciously healthy." "I'm sure it will pass." Calvin believed power meant forcing people to sign what he had already decided was true. For a while I believed justice meant denying him everything. But he was gone. The work remained. Real authority was quieter than revenge. Northbridge had once punished me for refusing to sign a lie. 2 years later, I approved their contract. Not because I forgot, because the truth was finally written into every page. 3 years later, Arcadia published its first public vendor integrity report. It listed contract suspensions, corrective actions, and whistleblower complaints by category. Several executives worried the numbers would make Arcadia look imperfect. They did. That was the point. Northbridge completed its second year without a major compliance failure. Marisol remained CEO, and Ethan became the company's first employee-elected board member. He still sent painfully long emails. His personal record was 19 pages about a software update. I replied, approved. Please remember, punctuation is not a controlled substance. Owen returned to graduate school and eventually became a quality manager. He kept the false shipment report in a locked drawer, not as evidence, but as a reminder of the manager he never wanted to become. My father attended my 40th birthday dinner and complained that the restaurant chairs had inadequate lumbar support. His recovery was not perfect, neither was mine. I still reread important emails. Closed conference room doors still made me uneasy. I kept the repaired laboratory mug even though it leaked slightly near the handle. Healing did not erase the evidence. It changed what the evidence meant. Calvin once took my title because I refused to sign his version of the truth. The title eventually came back larger. But that was not the real victory. The real victory was knowing that the next person who said no would not have to stand alone.